This lesson looks at imperial units of measurement and doing conversions within that imperial system. So just a quick note before we start, the imperial system is not Canada's official system, but we do use it an awful lot. Many of our building systems are based upon the imperial system. It's just a matter of history that things continue to get built that way. Our largest trading partner is the United States, and they do many things in imperial. So there are reasons for us to continue using imperial, even if it is not Canada's official units of measurement, as Canada is, like the vast majority of countries in the world, and has gone to the metric system for the past, 40-ish years. I think it was something like 1974, somewhere around there, that Canada switched to metric. So the units that we're going to be looking at are length units, specifically in the imperial system. So just a quick recap of what those units are and their abbreviations. So inches is sometimes abbreviated IN, sometimes with that quotation mark, the two lines. And the referent that I have here, the textbook talks about these quite a bit. It's just a way of thinking about, well, about how long is this value? So it's about the length of your thumb digit. A foot, referent kind of makes sense that it is a foot, although it's probably more your average man's foot than your average woman's foot. And symbol FT, or that one tick. Yard, YD, that's the length of an arm span, or how far you stride in one stride. And a mile is approximately the distance most people can walk in about 20 minutes. That would be, of course, dependent on how fast you walk, but approximately. And symbol MI. So when we're looking at imperial, one thing to be aware of is very often, instead of using decimals with imperial, we use fractional values. So we'll say things like something is 3 7/16 inch long. So when we do conversions, we do sometimes end up with these decimal values, or we round to the nearest certain fraction, like to the nearest 8th or the nearest 16th. So with those, we are going to look at some conversions. So a foot is equal to 12 inches, a yard is 3 feet or 36 inches, and a mile, this one I suspect is not in most people's heads, is 1,760 yards, or 5,280 feet. So these values are typically provided to you in the test form, or you have them on a formula sheet, so that you're not expected to necessarily have these values memorized, but you're expected to be able to use them. So the method I'm going to be using to do these conversions is something called dimensional analysis, or unit analysis. And this method is often used in the sciences. So some of you who've taken some science classes, like the science prep course or chemistry, will have seen dimensional analysis a lot. Others of you will be less familiar with it, so I'm going to go fairly slowly through the first couple examples. If you're in one of those science courses, you probably don't need to pause the video, but if this is a new concept to you, you may need to pause at various spots so you can go over how to look at that dimensional analysis. So first thing that we're looking at is converting yards to feet. So what we do with dimensional analysis is that we look at what it is we want to convert, and then we say, okay, how can I multiply this by something that's an equivalent, top and bottom, to get rid of the units I want and replace the units I don't want and replace them with the units I want. So we want to get rid of yards and we want to replace them with feet. So if we look up in our table, the thing we have that compares yards to feet is that 1 yard is equal to 3 feet. So when we do our multiplication, we know that if we multiply by 1 yard over 3 feet, or 3 feet over 1 yard, that fraction is equal to 1, because those things are equal. And anytime you have a fraction where the numerator equals the denominator, the fraction is 1. So when we're doing this, we're not changing our quantity, we're just changing what our quantity looks like. So the 3 feet we want on top so that our yards can cancel. So we're actually going to put in a little line here, right? So yards on the top are going to cancel with yards on the bottom. This thing didn't want me to do that right. Give me a second and let me reinsert a line there. Right, so those cancel. So I'm crossing them out, they cancel out. So we end up with 3 times 3, yards have canceled, so our units are going to be feet. So 9 feet. If we look at the next part, we have 96 inches to feet. So again, we want to say, how do we set this up so that things cancel? So we have 96 inches. We want to get rid of the inches. I'm actually going to show you what I'm doing here. So we want inches are on the top to start with. We want to get rid of them, so we're going to put inches on the bottom. Well, if we look, what's our conversion for feet to inches or inches to feet? Well, there's 1 foot is equal to 12 inches. So again, these inches are going to cancel both times. And I might even be able to show that in here. No strike through. And so when we do this conversion, inches cancels inches, we're left with feet. So 96 divided by 12 gives us 8 feet. Question C, we're looking a little differently. We're going to sort of multiple units, and sometimes this confuses people a bit, but if you think about how we generally say our heights in North America, right, I would say that I'm 5 foot 4 inches. So when we look at these values, right, when we say feet and inches, it's one total length. So we're going to put the whole number of feet on however many inches are left over. So our first step is to take those inches and convert them to feet the way we normally would. So 38 inches, we do the feet on top, inches on the bottom, just like our 96 one. But this one doesn't go evenly, right? When we go 38 divided by 12, if you put that in on your calculator, you're going to get 3.16 repeating, right? It's going to show up on your calculator. So the 3 feet is even, but then we have this leftover. Well, if we look, 3 feet is 3 times 12, or 36 inches. So 38 minus 36 leaves us with that remainder of 2. So those 2 that are left over is actually our inches. So if we're converting to something like this where we keep some of the original units, we actually keep the remainder when we do the division and leave it as those units. So next one, 42 inches to yards, feet, and inches. And I see I didn't type all of my answer in here, so we're going to do that. So we're going to put an equation in there. So 42 inches. And we want to go to yards, feet, and inches, but we're going to do it by steps. So first we're going to go from inches to feet. So there is 1 foot for every 12 inches. And that's going to leave us with 3.5, or 3 feet. And the 0.5, remember, is not our inches, it's our remainder. So 3 feet was 36 inches. Our remainder is actually 6 inches. So we get 3 feet 6 inches. Whoop, let me scroll up a bit. But then we want to go to yards, feet, and inches. So we're going to go one more step here, and we're going to take those feet and convert them to yards. So we're going to ignore the inches for the moment. We're just going to take 3 feet, and we're going to say in 1 yard there are 3 feet. So this works out to exactly 1 when we do the division, and there's no remainder. So we could say 0 feet. Now that was just the 3 feet part of it, so we've got to put back together with those 6 inches to say that there is 1 yard, 0 feet, and 6 inches. The 0 feet is definitely optional. You could just say 1 yard and 6 inches. Would be just as clear. We can also convert things like miles to feet. So going back up to your chart, You might need to flip to the previous section. 0.7 miles. Well, in 1 mile there's 5,280 feet. So again, miles on the bottom are going to cancel with miles on top, leaving us with 3,996 feet. Again, as you're going through this, I am going fairly quickly. If you need to pause the video, do that. Another one going from yards to feet to inches. So first of all, we take those 55 inches and bring them to feet. So 55 divided by 12 goes evenly 4 times, that's 48. 55 minus 48 leaves us with the 7 inches. Now there is a second way to do that when you're looking at your calculator rather than subtracting with the long division. Some people do prefer the second way. So if you type this into your calculator, you get 4.583 repeating. As I said, you could take that 4 and figure out, well, that's 48 inches and subtract it from our original 55 to get the 7 inches. Some people like to do it all in their calculator, so if you are one of those people, you can go 55 divided by 12, still get that 4.583 repeating, but then to figure out the 7 inches part, you would subtract the whole number portion, so in this case the 4, right, the part in front of the decimal, and so then you'd be left with the 5.583 repeating. So you multiply that result back by what we divided it by to get it back to its original units. So we multiply by 12 to get back to 7 inches. And if you do it like that, where it's all in your calculator, you don't retype in that value, you will get exactly 7 inches. If you retype in the value, it might not work out exactly. You might end up with something like 6.99999. So that part gets us to feet and inches. This one again is going all the way to yards. So we're going to have to take those 4 feet and convert them to yards. So 4 feet divided by 3 feet goes once with 1 left over. So that's 1 yard, 1 foot. And again, we put those calculations back together because when we said 4 feet here, we completely ignored our 7 inches. So we put the 7 inches back in our final answer. So those ones are just conversions within our imperial system. The next example looks at an application using some of those conversions. So we have a border being put in this bedroom and it's going near the ceiling, so it's going all the way around. Another way to say that is it's looking at the perimeter of the bedroom. And we know the bedroom is 10 feet by 12.5 feet. This kid's got a big bedroom. So we want to figure out how much this is going to take. So we look at our length and our widths, 10 feet and 12.5 feet respectively. It's going to take a total of 45 feet of this border. Now we're told that the border comes in rolls that are 4.5 feet long. So in order to figure out how many rolls, again, we can use dimensional analysis. So we want feet, we want to convert it to rolls. So feet has to go on the bottom, rolls goes on top. This one works out very evenly, and so she's going to need to buy 10 rolls. There are some questions like this in the textbook that don't work out evenly. So say it ended up being that she needed 10.1 rolls, right? Say she had to go not a nice even multiple of the rolls around the room. Anytime you need a partial roll and you're buying material, you got to buy the whole roll, right? So even if it would normally round it down, you would round that up for this sort of application question. So question 3. This one we're going to go through sort of in little details. So we want to get from the size of this tire all the way up to miles, or the other way around, we want to get from miles all the way down to how many revolutions this tire would make. So when we see this circumference, remember that's the distance around the circle. So when a tire revolves once, it travels its circumference, right? Because it goes from one point all the way back to that point if it's moving along a road. So if we start with our mile, we know how to convert miles to feet. Might have to look up in our chart how many that is, but we put the miles on the bottom, so the miles cancel, feet on top. Now the nice thing about dimensional analysis is we can just keep going with our calculation. So you'll notice our next step, and actually I am going to put in my slashes on this one because we've got lots of things canceling. So miles cancels, and we're going to cancel the feet in the next one. So the feet here are going to cancel with the feet here. And then lastly, and this is the part that is a little bit tricky, the circumference is the distance it travels in one revolution. So we have another equivalency in that one revolution equals that circumference. So we can cancel our inches with our inches. So we'll take the inches here and cancel them. So we're left with our answer in revolutions. So this is a bit of a longer calculation. You've got to multiply by 5280, multiply by 12, and then divide by 106.7 to get an answer of 593.8 revolutions of this particular tire in 1 mile. Second application you'll sometimes see with these conversions is scale diagrams. And there's kind of two ways to do scale diagrams. Again, I'm going to start out by looking at that dimensional analysis method. So when we have a scale diagram, when we see something like this where it says 1 to 25, that's saying 1 of whatever unit on the map is equal to 25 of whatever we have in real life, because of course the map is smaller. So this is actually a pretty large drawing, right? Because some drawings you might have 1 to 2,500. So we're going to take our actual lengths and we're going to convert them to our drawing lengths. So since we have no units here, we can actually put any units within this 1 to 25. So we could use feet, we could use inches, we could use centimeters, as long as they're both the same. So in this case, we're going to use feet because we're given the dimensions of the room in feet. So we're going to go 25 feet in reality, and then we're going to multiply by this scale. So our drawing is 1 foot for every 25 actual feet. So what's canceling here is the actual, we're being left with drawing. Now we do want to answer to inches, so we're going to multiply that by 12 inches. So in this particular case, a lot of things cancel out because not only do the feet and the actual cancel out, so does the 25. So we're left with 1 foot times 12 inches, and then the foot here cancels the foot. We're left with 12 inches. The 40 feet one doesn't work out quite so nicely because we end up with a decimal. And the question asks us to the nearest 32nd of an inch. So anytime we have one of these fractional values, to figure out the fraction that we've got, we're going to take our decimal portion and multiply by what we want that denominator to be. Because remember, 0.2 means 2/10, so we can work this out to figure out what it is as a 32nd. So 0.2 times 32, it gives us 6.4. We're asked to round to the nearest 32nd, so 6.4 rounds to 6. So we would have 6 32nds, but with inches, when we can reduce these sorts of fractions, we should. So 6 32nds, we're going to reduce down to 3/16. So even though it's written in 16th, it is to the nearest 32nd because that's equal to 6 32nds. So our statement should include both things. So the first one, that we didn't have to do any rounding, the drawing will be 12 inches. Second part, by our 19, and then we took that 0.2 and changed it to 3/16 of an inch. So that one's a little trickier. You might want to pause and re-go over that piece. Second way we sometimes have scale shown is that we're given units in it. So here 1 inch represents 15 miles. So again, we can still take that and use it as our conversion, that fraction that we're going to multiply by. So if we want to cancel inches, we'll put the inches on the bottom. If we're wanting to cancel miles because we're trying to figure out the map, we'll put the miles on the bottom. So what distance is shown by 5.5 inches? So we're starting out with inches and we want to figure out that distance in miles that it actually is. So we're going to have inches on the bottom, miles on top. Now I mentioned I was first going to show you these ones using dimensional analysis. A second way some people like to do these ones is set them up as a proportion question. So your one proportion is 1 inch represents 15 miles. So that can be a fraction, right? Our proportion. So for every 1 inch we have 15 miles, and then we would say for every 5.5 inches we have some unknown miles. So we'll put x in there. So if we wanted to do it this way, you end up solving by cross multiplication, right? X times 1 equals 15 times 5.5, and so we end up with x equals 82.5 miles. So whether you use dimensional analysis or proportions to solve a question like this, some people have done this before. You're comfortable with proportions, that's fine. I'll accept either way of answering it. You're still getting to the same answer. Second part of this question, still the same map. 1 inch represents 15 miles, but we're given the distance on the map and asked, well, how far is that? So if we're trying to figure that one out, we're taking this, I'm going to do a dimensional analysis again. We're taking this and we're doing it upside down though, because we know inches and we want to know miles. Sorry, we're doing it the same way. Both times we do inches, we want to know miles. So 15 on top, 1 inch on the bottom. Now, when you put this in your calculator, 2 3/8, remember if you want to figure that out as a decimal, 3/8 is 3 divided by 8, and then you put your 2 back in front of that, so 3 divided by 8 is 0.375. So if we were writing this in decimal form, 2.375 inches times 15 miles over 1 inch. And then it says answer to 3 sig figs. So we are going to need to round that answer because that's 3 decimals right now. So remember 3 sig figs is going to be those first 3 digits. And since it's followed by a 2, we're going to keep the 6 to go 35.6 miles. And since we rounded, maybe we'll say approximately. So that's our imperial to imperial conversions and some word problems using that. Next lesson we'll look at some metric system conversions and to imperial from metric and vice versa.